Hello, everyone. I believe you all should be hearing me right now. I think we're all live. And thank you for waiting for the couple of minutes that I promised. Let me welcome you. And thank you for tuning into the second episode of Bird is the Word. All right, this is a very laid back conversation on birds, if you haven't been here before, birding, and all sorts of very cool bird-related things from around the world. So remember that each episode, while the date is set, the time varies depending on the time zone our guest is from. So be sure to head across to learnthebirds.com and register there to be part of our rapidly growing community. And most importantly, get that Monday Birding newsletter where you'll be notified of all the wonderful goings on at Learn the Birds. Also, be sure to subscribe to Learn the Birds YouTube channel where you're looking at this right now. And most importantly, feel free to interact in the chat, ask questions, right? Say where you're from, just keep it birdie, right? As we love to do here. So today's guest is Suzy Buttress from Hampshire in the United Kingdom. Suzy is a lifelong bird watcher and has been fortunate to watch birds on every continent. Her show, the Casual Birder podcast, encourages people to appreciate birds wherever they are found. In the show, Suzy takes bird walks, speaks with other enthusiasts, and shares stories from bird watchers around the world. Her favorite birding days are ones where she can sit quietly and watch the behavior of the birds around her, or take slow walks in the countryside, frequently stopping to listen for calls and enjoying every bird she sees. So welcome to the show, Suzy. I think you should be all hearing me now.
Yep, and I'm here now as well.
All right, lovely. Welcome. So my first question to you is, what is the last bird you saw today?
A rook. My garden is full of them at the moment. It's a kind of, it's a member of the crow family. I have, in the last couple of years, we've started getting rooks in our garden. We have a very small urban garden, but a particular rook has befriended me and brought its mates over to meet me as well. They're all still quite nervous about me, but they quite like the food that I put out. So
yeah, I'm sure they'll get used to it. I'm sure they'll get used to it in a little bit.
I think just seeing the one that has befriended me, they learn from each other, and it's been really fascinating to watch them, to have such close contact with them. So
yeah. Wonderful. So so let me ask you something, right? First of all, you describe yourself as a lifelong bird watcher, and I'm inclined to describe myself in very much the same way, but I can't really say when did I deliberately start to look at birds. So I've been looking at birds from when I was really small, but to say really look at birds, I can't really tell when that really started. Like, is there, a moment where it all clicked? What about you? Was there a particular experience that got you hooked on birds?
well, I've got lots of memories of watching birds when I was a child, and I would. We had a garden that it was alongside a field, so we tended to get quite a lot of birds in our garden, and I've got really vivid memories of. In those days, we would put bread out for the birds because we didn't know any better. So I've got really vivid memories of throwing bread out for the birds, especially this time of year when they'd have the youngsters around, and just laying on my tummy, looking through our windows, which are floor to ceiling windows, and just laying with my hands, my head in my hands, just looking out the window and watching the sparrows and the starlings and the blackbirds outside. And I did that. I would just sit there watching them for, hours.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I can remember doing, I clearly wanted to be a Disney princess. And so I can remember sitting on the field just by our house and having bread in my hands and just willing the birds to come to me because I wanted them to come and land on my hand.
Yeah.
And, as an adult, I've had a few experiences like that and it's been magical. I know that I'm just a bird table. It's not like they go, oh, it's Susie, I must go and land on her. It's just
My
like,
best
oh,
friend.
exactly. It's,
Yeah.
there's a sunflower seed. That's handy. I'll have that. But in terms of like, I didn't get my first bird book until I was like in my teens.
Yeah.
But I had lots of encyclopedias of birds around the world, but I didn't have my first bird book of birds in the UK. We had a reference book that was in the house. It was birds around the UK, but it seemed to focus on things like owls and birds of prey and things that you just didn't see as in the day to day. And I've only ever seen owls a few times in my life, even now. So as a
Yeah.
child, it just wasn't something that I ever saw. But when I was 15, I got my first bird book, and from then I realised that there were birds that I could see. But I will admit that there were long periods during my adulthood where I wasn't birding very frequently at all. So it would be really, just the odd glance here and there. And it was really just our holidays that we would spend time watching birds, but not during the day to day. And it's only as I've got older that I've actually made more time for birds in my life.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that even when you weren't actually birding, you were still hearing birds, or at least you would see something and say, hey, there was a house sparrow or whatever, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, so okay, so I know you're very well traveled, right? But before we get to your travels, and we're gonna get there, I want to begin in your garden, right? On many episodes of your podcast, you speak of enjoying your backyard birds. Do you have any favorites?
It's like asking if you've got favourite children. You can't ask that.
I know that's the hardest question, right? People always
Now,
ask, "What's your favorite bird?" Oh, I don't know.
yeah.
Comes to me.
And the sort of easy answer is whichever bird I'm seeing at that point.
Yeah.
There are birds that I do enjoy seeing a little bit more, especially this time of year when they're bringing their youngsters around to the garden, or they've got youngsters, which make them, if they've got youngsters in the nest, obviously they're going to be a little bit more tame because they want food.
Of course.
So you're showing there a male house sparrow and a
Yeah.
European robin. And both of those at the moment are taking advantage of the fact that I'm providing live mealworms in the garden.
Oh, yeah.
And so they've both been coming, several sparrows, and the robins have been coming. But also I have a blue tip pair nesting in the garden. And because the male has an unusual spot on its face in the plumage, I can
Yeah.
recognise it, because that's part of the problem with birds. It's quite hard to recognise individuals unless you've got
Mm-hmm.
some
Some
aberration of
distinguishing,
plumage.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, distinguishing
Yeah.
character.
So I'm able to recognise Spot
Yeah.
and his partner, and so they come for mealworms as well.
Ooh.
So really, it's the birds that are interacting with me that I
Yeah.
get very attached to.
Of course. I never knew that sparrows, like house sparrows, would eat mealworms. I thought they only ate seeds.
Well, I didn't know for a long time, and during the breeding season, they'll also eat aphids and other insects because it's protein for the young.
True, yeah.
Oh, and I've got a quick house sparrow piece of news for you.
Oh, yeah, do
So
tell.
I just found out this afternoon
Mm-hmm.
that so I have two swift nest boxes on the side of my house. Swifts are a bird that come here from Africa. They come here to
Yeah.
breed, and they've just arrived back. But they are the populations are declining, and it's mainly because we're losing the places that they used to nest. So
Yes.
they would use buildings, holes in buildings, old churches, things like that, old walls, high up locations. But
Yeah.
as houses are getting, being refurbished, or new houses being built and old places being knocked down, there aren't the gaps in the brickwork for them to nest. And so there's a really big campaign to try to get people to put swift boxes up to just give them somewhere else to try to nest. Anyway, I've had these boxes up for 3 years now and never had anything in them. And then this
Yeah.
afternoon, I just thought that male house sparrow is chirping an awful lot. What's he up to? And when I
Yeah.
looked, he was sitting inside one of my boxes. And so whether there's a nest in there or they're just starting one for a second brood or something, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
delighted because even though I put them up for the swifts, if other birds can start to use them first,
Of course.
it means that it will kind of get that bird use out of them. And
Yes.
I'm absolutely more than happy for house sparrows to use them here.
Yeah.
So I'm delighted that there's a house sparrow that's taken up residence in one of my swift boxes.
Ooh, wonderful. Someone is asking in the YouTube chat if you do bird photography.
I took these photographs, so yes.
And well, the question is, I assume you put feeders out. So would you be able to tell us about the kinds of feeders that you have out?
Absolutely. So whereas I say I take I do bird photography, I take photographs of birds. I
Yeah.
won't say that they are perfect photographs. I'm always learning, and it's for me it's more about trying to capture the bird than worry about what settings I'm using. So some of my photos are dire, but I'm learning. I'm learning. So in terms of feeders, yes, you can see there I've got a goldfinch there on a sunflower heart feeder. So I have 2 feeders in the garden with hearts in, sunflower hearts. They are in separate trees because one of the feeders the bigger birds are able to get access to, and so I always like to keep one feeder in a more secluded place so the smaller birds can go and feed if they want to.
Yeah.
I have been putting out, well, it changes through the year. So up until about a month ago, I was putting out a suet block every day and also suet pellets. So these are made of beef suet and mealworms and peanut flour. And it's just like a high energy thing. They're made in a way that they can be put out year round, so they won't melt and cause problems with plumage.
Yeah.
Mealworms, I've been putting out dried mealworms this year. Some of those I've been soaking for several hours in hot water, which is not pleasant, but it means that you're rehydrating them a little bit because I don't.
Oh, yes.
You
They
don't
come
really want them
dried.
to. Yeah, you don't want to be, but they will eat them dry. But I wouldn't want them
Yeah.
to feed them to the young dry because
Yeah.
there's no moisture.
Of
And
course.
this year I started putting out live mealworms, which I don't enjoy doing. And the reason I do it is purely selfish. It's not great for the mealworms. I try to give them as good a life as they can have while they're around, but the birds absolutely love them. And in the last few weeks, we've had some really poor weather here, and so there would have been fewer caterpillars and bugs around for the birds. So I do think that I've probably been helping as a really good supplement some of the local birds with their young. What else do I put out? So every day there will be some mixed bird seed, but I use no mess bird seed, so a bird seed that won't grow. And I
Yes.
generally put that out on ground feeding trays so that birds like blackbirds, collared doves, wood pigeons, the rooks, the sparrows, dunnock, everything that eats from ground will eat from there.
Yes.
The hanging feeders tend to be more for the finches, goldfinch, greenfinch, the house sparrows, and the blue tits. But at the moment, they're not taking a great deal of seeds. It's not going down very quickly. It's the mealworms that they're really concentrating on. So
Yeah.
that's costing me a fortune. But there you go. It's for the
Um,
birds.
of
So-
course, it's always for the birds, right? What is there any like which birds would have come for the suet? I think that's woodpeckers and stuff like that would come for.
Oh, if only I had woodpeckers. Yeah,
Oh,
so where I live, I'm on an estate, so we have very few trees, and people tend to cut trees down, so it makes it worse.
oh yeah.
We had a gorgeous big oak tree at the end of our garden that the new neighbours at the end of the garden cut down 2 years ago and broke my heart, but it wasn't my tree,
Oh,
so I couldn't really do anything about it.
yeah.
So we've just got very low trees. Probably the highest tree we've got in our garden is about 10 foot tall. We've got an acer that's quite, reasonably tall. But really, my birds sort of rely on shrubs, which means that, and also the closest sort of big trees are, several streets away. And I'm not even sure, that's just like a line of trees. So I don't even think we'd have woodpeckers there. So I don't have any habitat close enough to me to get woodpeckers on nuthatches. But back to
Oh
your
boy.
original question, who eats the suet? The rooks love the suet, magpies eat
Yeah.
the suet. So the crow type jackdaws. Yeah, so there you've got a jackdaw and a rook.
Yes.
So
I, bel
I think that rook there is actually my friend rook. And the reason
Yes.
I say I think is because that photograph was taken 3 years ago when there was a rook that started to come closer to the house. And since we've had lockdown and we've been home a lot, we've kind of built up this relationship with this rook. And I think it's the same one. But it is really hard to tell them apart. But the very fact that it's got certain behaviours that it does makes me recognise that rook. What else? The blue tits and great tits will eat suet, and the sparrows. And
Oh, and
what
the
else?
sparrows as
Oh
well. Yeah.
yeah. They're opportunists and they'll take whatever's
Yeah.
around. They love the suet pellets, so
Hmm.
they'll take this because they're kind of small and they can just grab a little pellet and run off with it, so they're not out in the open to eat it.
Yeah. I'm seeing some comments from Marilee,
Oh
and yeah, so it seems that she knows you
yes, Mary
because
Lee was in my 100th episode. She was
oh, wonderful.
in my live
Wonderful.
stream last weekend.
There we go. Yeah. So she says main thing is seeing the birds through new eyes with camera as long as we keep distances. Ethical bird photography, which Susie practices. So she knows your habits clearly.
Yeah, and Mary Lee is very, very hot on ethical bird photography as well,
Excellent.
as I
That's
know
a good thing to
you
be
are
hot
as
on,
well. So
of course.
yes, so these photographs. I mean, I've recently purchased a high zoom camera, and that's how I'm managing to get these close ups. The one of the rook wasn't too hard to get. It was just outside our kitchen window, so that was quite
Yeah.
easy. But the jackdaw was that little bit further off, but again, still within our garden.
Yeah, I've been reading about the jackdaws, right? And I read about some of them actually being very specialized in terms of their diets.
Oh,
And yeah, some of them have been, documented having eggs, like they're specializing in removing eggs from certain birds' nests and stuff like that. And one was even seen, observed removing bats from a tree hole where they would roost.
oh,
So.
wow.
Did you ever notice them feeding on anything kind of strange other than the usual berries and insects and stuff?
Well, I wouldn't have said that eggs was that unusual because all of the corvids are known to take eggs
True,
from
yeah.
nests. So that, and actually, I tested that out the other day because I had when my eggs were delivered the other day, one of them was
Yeah.
already cracked.
Oh,
And so rather than using it myself, which is probably horrible of me to put it out for the birds, I just put it out for the birds. And
yeah.
straight away, it was actually a jackdaw that broke into it and had the egg. So the way I figure it, there was protein there for it to. But this was like chicken's egg, you know. Well, I knew there wasn't going to be a chicken side,
Yes.
but I didn't know about the bats, and I had heard recently about great tits as well, feeding on bats,
Oh, really?
which is very unusual. But I
Yeah.
think perhaps when there's hard winters, any protein source, you know,
Yeah, I
you'll
guess.
take.
Yeah. Mary
But
Lee,
these,
so sorry, go
sorry,
ahead.
what I was going to say was that what I hadn't realised was that jackdaws would be that interested in mealworms, which they
Mm,
absolutely are. And so one of them has recognised that I put mealworms out. Now I put them out in a little bowl, and I have like a kind of cage around the bowl, so it only allows house sparrow and below sized
yeah,
birds to get
yeah,
in. So the
yeah.
blue tit can, the robin can, dunnock, and house sparrow, which does make me feel bad for the starlings and the blackbird. So I then put some out in a bowl, hoping
Yeah,
that they'll come by. But what's been happening is the jackdaw has recognised that I've started putting this. So when it sees me out, I don't know if it's the same one because unlike the other birds that I can tell apart, none of the
yeah,
jackdaws have got anything special about them that I can spot. It's a particular bird. But there is one that does keep turning up, and it seems to respond to me when I say, go on in the green dish, and it goes over to the green dish. So that's me just putting my own interpretation on how they
of,
behave.
of course. Mary Lee's also asking about cats in terms of ground feeding. Have you any problems
Right.
with those?
No. Well, cats aren't allowed in my garden during daylight hours.
Hmm.
I'm like the weird woman who goes running and screaming down a garden to chase a cat out because my garden is for birds. So
Of
I
course.
figure there are plenty of other gardens around where the cats can roam,
Yeah,
not my garden. I do put out cat food, cat nibbles for the hedgehog.
yeah,
And on my wildlife camera, I have seen that it's probably about 60-40 whether the hedgehog gets to eat it or a cat finds it first. So
Oh,
there are cats in my garden at night, and they find the cat food.
yeah.
But majority of times, I would say the hedgehog does get it. But if I see a
Mhm.
cat, yes, I'm perfectly happy for people to have cats, and they can be very interesting creatures. I don't have any pets myself, which is probably why I
Yeah.
focus on the birds so much. But they're just not welcome in my garden. So
Yes.
I do scream at them to get out of the garden, which
Yeah.
probably freaks out the neighbours, but there you go.
It's fully understandable. I mean, I have a cat as well, but he's completely indoor, and we're very strict about him going outside. And because we're aware of that ecological problem that the cats being such wonderfully equipped predators, what they do.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
know, the thing is, you can't protect the birds all the time. And for example, we have sparrowhawks that come to the garden, especially now
Hmm.
that I've got more birds feeding. But in my head, that's okay because it's another bird that's feeding.
Yeah.
And it's not getting a nice bowl of food back home and then coming out and eating my birds like the cats
Yeah.
might.
Of course.
So you're showing here European starling
That's
and
right.
red-legged partridge. Now, the red-legged
Yes.
partridge is actually a very unusual visitor to our
That's
garden.
yeah. That's why I made sure and included here because I was like, wow, this. I remember when you posted this and how excited you were about it. So,
Yeah.
um, let's hear about
So
this.
we've not, sorry, I was
No, it's
going to
just
tell you the
yeah,
story of the
yeah,
red-legged partridge.
yeah. That's what I was asking you to tell us.
I've got a feeling that it monitors my social media channels because back in, I think it was the end of January, there was quite a comical moment that happened with this red-legged partridge, which was sitting very close to our greenhouse after we'd had a dump of snow, and the snow was melting off the roof of the greenhouse. And I just happened to capture a short video as the snow slumped off the greenhouse and missed the partridge by, I don't know, a nanosecond as the partridge ran away. And I got this great
Yeah.
little video of it running away. Um, just a few weeks after that, I think, well, probably we had about 4 weeks more of the red-legged partridge visiting, but I've not seen it for probably about 6 weeks. So I don't know if it's still around or not. So it's an unusual bird. It's released into the countryside. Well, it's used for hunting, for shooting. So I can only imagine that somewhere nearby we have somewhere that is raising them for shoots,
All right.
and it's escaped. And so it's, as far as I'm concerned, good on it. It made
Yeah.
it away from the shoot, and it's in my
It's safe.
garden. So yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Now this red-legged partridge, I would see it roaming the neighborhood, and I'm sure lots of my neighbors thought that it was their bird, because it would come and just sit in the garden for hours and
Hmm.
scratch in the dirt and take dust baths and then just sit in the sun and sun itself. And it was just like company.
Yeah.
It would never approach too much. Occasionally when I'd go to put seed out, it'd come running down the garden as if it was like pleased to see me, but then it would always like stop, and it's like, oh no, there's a human, I'll wait until the food is on the floor.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was never like tame, but it was still nice to see it in the garden. It's still such a fantastically plumaged bird, being able to see all those colors and just have it like
Hmm.
clucking around, because it makes these great little clucking noises when it eats, and it sounds really cute. And if I lived in the right place, I'd probably have chickens as well, just to have them scratching around in the dirt. And
Yeah.
so it was quite nice to have that kind of bird, a different kind of bird in the garden.
Yeah, it seems it's a really, really lovely bird. I'm assuming that I didn't see the legs from this picture, but I'm assuming that the legs are indeed red, right?
They are, yes, yeah.
Uh,
It looks
Good.
like a little dumpling a lot of the time because it's just like very round. But when
Yeah.
it runs, it stretches right up, very
Really?
quail-like, and the legs are very long with very big feet. So when it runs, yeah, it's a bit velociraptor-like.
It's a
But the
surprise
rest of the
then.
time, it's just like a dumpy
Yeah.
bird. So
It doesn't seem like that, just from looking at it like this.
you should check out my snow video where it's running away from the
It
snow
will,
dump. You'll see it in that.
without a doubt. So, let's see. I'm seeing Steph is here. Hi, Steph.
Oh, hi, Steph.
Yeah, and it's amazing how birds know when a person is going to fill a feeder. Yeah, that's true. It happens with me too as well at home here. When I go out on the deck, the cacophony of chirping from the woods is amazing. Yeah, I'm
Oh,
sure. I'm sure they're always out, and they know what's happening. So here we go. This is what
Yes.
I've been really waiting to ask you, right? Can you tell us about this Eurasian Sparrowhawk?
Yes. So this one, I believe, is a male. It's got
Hmm?
quite a lot of the peachy colouring
Yeah.
around it and the blue-grey back. Now, this one was from a couple of years ago. It's not. So recently we had a chat, a live stream chat for my show. And
Yes.
just before I was due to speak with you, a sparrowhawk made a kill in our garden. And while it's always shocking to see that, at the same time, it's an amazing natural sight that you don't often get a chance to see.
Yes.
So I did take some videos and some photographs of the sparrowhawk in the garden. And that one, I'm not sure whether that was an immature male. So with sparrowhawks, I think they're very
Hmm.
like your sharp-shinned hawks. I don't know if you have sharp-shinned
Not
hawks,
not
but
here, but I know of
in
them.
America they do. Yeah.
Yeah, North America.
So with sparrowhawks, the male is like a blue-grey color with a russety front,
Yes.
and the
Yeah.
female is
A little
larger
browner.
and browner. Yeah, so
Yeah.
still has the brown, but I found out recently from people in my group that in my Facebook group that immature males can look very much like females. So now I'm less sure when I say, oh yes, that's a male or that's a female. But this
Yeah.
one I believe is a male. Um, and yes, so this one was at the end of the garden. I think it had caught a starling.
Hmm.
And yeah, just amazing to see. I don't know whether you were going to show the photograph of the other sparrowhawk
No, I
or
only put this one in. Yeah.
okay, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't mind at all. No, it's just that what was interesting about seeing well both these birds, but particularly the other one, was that as it took nearly an hour to eat all of this bird, and I was determined not to disturb it so that it could finish the meal.
Hmm.
But it was getting closer and closer to the time when I was going to be talking to you, so I was kind of like, on that balance. But what I noticed was how full the crop became of the bird,
Yes.
and I'd never really seen that before. And it was
Hmm.
really noticeable about how heavy and rounded the sort of upper chest area was of the bird, and that led me to look further into how the crop functions and why some birds have them more. I think some birds use them more than others. But yeah, that was really interesting, and I think I was getting a little bit confused before then about where the crop was. I knew it was around the chest area,
Yeah.
but one of the things the rooks have is an expandable throat pouch. You could say a bit like a pelican, but they store food there, so they can eat a lot of food or take in
Okay.
a lot of food and hold it there to take off
Hmm.
elsewhere to cache. And I'd been calling that the crop because I knew it was kind of like
Yeah.
expanding. But when I saw this sparrowhawk, I realized, no, this throat isn't a
It
crop.
can't
This
be,
is
right?
no, this
Yeah,
is
this
like,
is
I think they
different.
call it a gullet pouch. It's like what?
Gula?
Oh, it could be. I didn't know how to pronounce
I'm
it,
not sure.
but it's the expandable throat that the same kind of thing that that pelicans have,
Yeah.
where it just expands and holds food.
I'm looking for this here.
There you go. So you can
There it is.
see
Mm-hmm.
that crop. You can see the real bulge at the front and at the lower part of the throat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
wasn't sure with that one whether that was I thought it was a female, but as I say, I'm not absolutely sure. So because
Yeah.
it does seem a bit grayer rather than browner,
It
so
does.
I would be open to hearing from people.
Yeah, well,
But yeah, what did strike me from that one, because I took so many photographs, it was there for such a long time.
yeah.
I'd never really realised before how far apart the legs were. So when it was
Oh, that's
looking
true.
face on, it
Yeah.
almost looked like it was wearing a pair of pajamas. It had these stripy legs, but the legs were far apart and not like a sparrow where it feels like you're very,
Yeah,
close and very hoppy. And
it's true.
I guess it must be from, being able, it needs to be shaped that way. It needs to be that way to grab prey, hold it down. Um,
Yeah.
you know, It's just a different. And
Probably, yeah.
when you look at eagles and things like that, they are
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
squarer as well.
I'm thinking about it and how the bird it hunts. It hunts birds, and birds tend to zoom off in some arbitrary kind of direction. So maybe it's some kind of evolutionary advantage where they can, you know, just at the moment when they're about to strike, they can afford to have their their feet just like spread out a little bit more.
Yeah, I guess, and
Could
especially if they're
be.
catching
Yeah,
using the
that's fine.
feet. Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome for that non-scientific explanation.
But you know what? That's how it all starts, isn't it? From observation, and
Of
then
course.
some people are able to go into it in more detail than others.
Yeah, definitely. So one more question about backyard birding, right? Has it been for you cathartic in any way, especially like in this period of lockdown when we can't really travel that much?
Yeah, I'd been trying very hard beforehand to make the time to look at my backyard birds. There's always the temptation to ignore that's closest to us and always want to see the more exotic and the things that are further
Yes.
away. And so I had already been, making that effort to say, don't dismiss those birds closest to us. But oh my goodness, yes, during lockdown when it was all that we could go out and see, I was so,
Mm-hmm.
so thankful for having birds around that I could just spend time with. And last summer, in fact, it was this time last year,
Mm-hmm.
we just created an extra little patio in the garden. We just had some old paving slabs and we'd cleared a space. So we just put some slabs down and put a table on it. And it was a different perspective. It wasn't a perspective that I'd been used to seeing. It was the other end of the garden, but it was
Yeah.
nearer some shrubs, and so I could sit there for hours, as I did because that's what I do, and
Mm.
and have the birds just hopping through the shrubs and getting on with their lives, but
Yeah.
feeling closer to them because I was amongst them. Whereas when I'm at the house, the shrubs are further away, and so yes,
Yes.
some will come close to the house, but not that many, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't feel quite as connected.
Yeah.
But yes, I really did rely on my, and anyone who listens to my podcast will know that because I've had so many episodes about what's been going on in my backyard, the dramas that you see,
Yeah.
the changes in the season with the different birds that come, and
Yes.
just how they behave. It's
Yeah.
just been fascinating.
And what I've noticed here as well with birds in my backyard is a kind of social dynamic. Have you noticed the same thing?
Well, I've noticed the pecking order, shall we say?
Yeah.
Is that what you're? So what have you seen?
Well, like there would be certain individuals then that would be like a little more boisterous than others, and some like within the same species,
Yeah,
right? So like we have kiskadis here, and the kiskadis like to come and they like to shout their calls, and their crest comes up and everything like that. And then there's one, I think it's probably a young bird, and it gives a very very meek call. So like I'm seeing it kind of growing up, and then I'm seeing all of the other birds desperately trying to raise their young. We have cocoa thrushes here that are nesting, and like you would know when the eggs hatch because all of a sudden they start to become very, very frantic in their actions, and they try to, well, we have to go and get food, we have to go and feed this, and it's just very nice to see. And you don't see that if you're out. You don't get to see the same birds over and over again.
no, no, that's
Yeah.
definitely the case. Seeing those birds interacting. So, one of the things I've noticed with the rooks, because I've been able to see those more. Now, traditionally, for me, a rook was just something that was in a farm field. Yes, you'd see big flocks of them in a farm field, but it would be miles away, and you just know those big black birds. But they associate very closely with jackdaws,
Mm.
and so. But there's a pecking order amongst the rooks and with the jackdaws as well. So some of the jackdaws are a bit cheeky and will sort of dive in and try to take a bit of food out from under a rook. But then even amongst the rooks, there are individuals that are more dominant, and you can tell the really dominant ones as soon as they swoop into the garden, immediately they fluff themselves up.
Oh
They
yeah.
their leg feathers, which look like pantaloons. I always call it like pantalooning.
Yeah.
They come in, their leg feathers are dropped, their wings are out, and their crests or their crown. They
Yeah.
lift the feathers on their head,
Yeah.
and and you know, I'm a little bit upset when my rook friend, isn't that dominant, so
Yeah.
gets pushed out of the way by these bigger ones. So no, if you were nice to me, I'd let you have the food, but no, that one gets the food.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see, and now also looking between species. So we have wood pigeons that come to the garden. They're quite big birds. You know, they're like a hefty pigeon.
Yes.
I don't know. Do you have? Is it white-winged doves?
We
They are.
have we have pale-vented pigeons here,
Oh,
which are on
okay.
the size of the feral pigeons.
Oh, so these are bigger than a feral pigeon. They're more
Yeah.
dumpy,
Yeah.
and but they get very affronted by the rooks. So if you can imagine, you know, a rook has got this like really big long bill,
Hmm.
quite sharp and dagger looking, but it's an I think it's I think it's mainly used for digging in the ground and pulling grubs out of the ground.
Okay.
They do eat some meat, I think, but they're not carrion birds as far as I
Hmm.
know. And certainly the diet in the garden doesn't make, you know, they haven't gone for anything that looks, you know, meaty. Um, so you see this big long dagger beak, and you might imagine it's quite a vicious bird. The wood pigeon is obviously got a much smaller bill, and sometimes they'll go to the same feeder. And honestly, the rooks don't mind that the pigeon is there. They're not trying to
Yeah.
threaten the pigeon or anything. But it's so
Interesting.
funny that the wood
Yeah.
pigeons always get this very sort of affronted kind of look, and they sort of
Mhm.
rear themselves up, and it's almost like, well, how dare you? I was there first. And you can't help but put these like voices to the
Mhm.
birds
Of
that you're
course.
looking at,
Yeah.
because the actions are just so like, well, what are you
Yeah.
doing? You know, and the rook's just like, yeah, look, I'm just getting some food here. Just, you know, ignore me. And
Yeah.
it's just
Just
so funny just watching those interspecies interactions as well.
indeed. Indeed. Yeah. So, have you ever seen like the there's people who do these graphics with birds and they draw little stick figure arms on them. I
Yeah.
think those are absolutely hilarious. But anyway.
They're a little bit scary. I just find them
Yeah.
a little bit scary. But I
Brilliant.
absolutely, I mean, when I was a child, there was and you know, for real scientists, this probably makes them shiver. It's like, oh, don't even go there. But when I was a child, we used to have a TV program with a guy, Johnny Morris, who used to do voiceovers for animals. So you'd see a little bit of film, and then this guy
Hmm.
would be doing voiceovers, and it would give the personality to the animals. And it's
Hmm.
terrible anthropomorphism, but you know, I loved it. And I can't help but still have that kind of view of some of the birds that I see now. You know,
Yes.
they strut around the garden, and you feel like, you know, they're inspecting things, or it's just the style. It's I think it's a natural thing to put a personality on them, even though you know that isn't the case at all.
Well, we think so because we truly don't know it. It might be, unless convincingly proven otherwise, we don't know for surety, right? So anyway, let's move on, right? Let's talk a little bit about your travels, right? We've spoken about your backyard birding, and you told me about this incredible day of birding in Baja California in
Oh,
Mexico.
yes.
Now I understand that you kind of transposed your own backyard birding habits across the ocean. Is that right?
Absolutely, yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And
Oh, we were just so
please.
lucky. We'd found this little casita. It's just like a little cottage, and it had a mature garden around it, and that's where we were staying for a few days. And we'd just come off of a so we had just come off of a sailing trip from San Diego, which is just over the border in the US, and then
Yes.
from that green area. And we had sailed all the way down the western edge of Baja California, looking at whales, with a guy called Mark Carbadine, who's a conservationist, and he runs wildlife tours.
Hmm.
And we had ended up at the very southern edge of Baja California. And so where we were staying was just in the very bottom area, and just had this lovely garden in this with this casita. We were just there for a few days, and just myself and my husband. And he knows me very well, and he knows that wherever we go, if we're staying in a location somewhere, that first day I just want to spend the whole day at the location, because I just want to explore the garden or the
Of
surroundings. I just
course.
want to see what's going on there.
To
And
settle.
this was yeah, Absolutely. And so I got up before it was dawn. I was outside because the noises, the sounds, the calls, everything was so different and new. And I just wanted to experience it all. And of course, it's lovely weather. So, it's very mild and you can just go out very early. And then just seeing what birds come to the garden, because it was a mature garden and there were bird baths in the garden. There was already a source of water. There were birds that were already used to using it. So it was fantastic. I could just sit there and see what was just coming and doing its usual daily routine.
Yeah.
And the very first thing we saw were hooded orioles, which, are just such a stunning bird to see when you don't have that kind of colour bird at all, usually. Even the female birds, which aren't as brightly coloured, were still interesting to see because they were clinging on the side of plants and sipping the nectar from the flowers. And it's just wonderful. This Costa's hummingbird, that's a heavily cropped photo. It was so hard to get a picture with it looking with the sunlight on the feathers of the throat. Every single time I tried to take the photograph, it turned away or it just moved slightly and it just looks black when the light isn't on the feathers. But that was endemic to the area. That one, it's got this very large gorget or throat area, and it has those drooping down extra extended.
I love those, I've seen them displaying, well, not in person, but I've seen pictures and video of them displaying and they flare the entire thing and it's magnificent.
That was something, and I'm sure that they know when they're facing the sun and not, because when this was something I learned in San Diego. So on that walk, I did a bird walk just before we left on the cruise. Well, a cruise, it was a tiny ship. It was 25 people, so it was hardly a ship. It was but before we left on the tour, I did a bird walk in San Diego and I saw a hummingbird land on the side of a palm tree. And it turned its head and just suddenly there was this burst. I think it was an Anna's hummingbird, but it was just this burst of raspberry pink. And then it sort of disappeared again. And then it burst of raspberry pink again. And I thought, I'm sure it knows. It must be signaling to other hummingbirds, look, I'm here. And that was just, that was an amazing thing to see. So yeah, hummingbirds are one of my favorite birds to see because again, they're tiny. They're very, they seem to be quite aggressive to each other. So they're quite feisty for such small birds. But the colours are just stunning. And of course, because they hover, that's something we just don't see over here. It's just so different. But that was a beautiful day. I was speaking about it the other day and said, I got up before dawn. I sat out there just watching what birds came. I'm so thankful that I actually recorded an episode while I was there because I thought while I'm watching all this, I just want to tell people. I want to record my experiences. And I'm so grateful I did because now when I listen back, it takes me straight back into that moment. But before I knew where I was, the sun was going down. It felt like the day was only like a couple of hours long. I'd been out there the full day, but it just went by so quickly, but so perfectly. It was just a fantastic day. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially about hummingbirds and from your perspective as well as someone who is not accustomed to seeing hummingbirds, that from my end, as someone who lives in a place that has many species of hummingbirds, you don't ever get used to them. You don't ever get tired of them. And it's ridiculous, the colors that they have in their feathers, because what goes on with them, it's like a function of the incident light from the sun. So that you have to take into consideration the kind of light. So is it like direct sunlight, or is it maybe it's overcast and the light is diffuse? So they can look, different under different lighting conditions. And then their feather structure has this crystalline structure. So the light that you see is refracted within the feathers. And that's what gives it this kind of metallic sheen a lot of the times. And I'm seeing a comment on the YouTube live stream. Someone, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but DMFINPA, right? I just did a webinar on hummers. They said they actually don't have the color pigment in their feathers. I don't know that for sure, but it's what they'd said. Yeah, that is true. Because in regular birds' feathers, the pigment is there, but in hummingbird feathers. So if you look at the picture of the Costa's hummingbird, you'd see that the structure of the feather itself on the gorget is quite different from, say, the feathers on the breast and on the wing. So even on the crown, they have the same kind of crystalline structure. So, but anyway, um, I could just go on and on.
So could I.
So, but I see the time is moving on, right?
Yeah, I'm
So,
thinking, oh no.
yeah, right. So so this is going as quickly
I'm
as your
good for
day
another
in
3 hours, so you know.
We'll see. I actually ended up allowing some people late into the live stream because I did not check just before we started. I saw some last minute registrations, so I'm hoping that everyone got in on time, and I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so Merrily says those feathers are black and only the reflection of light creates momentary color. Yeah, it's reflection and refraction. And a lot of times the feathers can be black or brown or even clear. You see it a lot of times on some bluebirds as well. So, because blue is a color that does not actually exist very
I
often in
know,
nature,
and that
right?
is such a strange concept, isn't it? Because you see well, you see when you travel lots of
Yeah.
bluebirds. Apparently there are a couple here. Well, obviously we have blue tits, but it's not. See, I've done it again. We have blue tits. That's how I should be. Not. Oh, we've got blue tits.
Yeah.
But it's just that when I
We
look
only
at the
have.
back of, yeah, exactly. But when I look at the back of a blue jay, for example, the blue
Mhm.
is so stunning, and I saw a picture of a mountain bluebird, and I'd love to see that. I love blue is a color that I love to see on birds. But yes, I've learned that it's not a natural color. It's not. The feathers aren't blue
Yeah.
if you were to look at them.
And you see that also in some white birds, actually,
Oh,
that
really?
they
I
have a
didn't know
similar
that.
kind of structure. Yeah. And you get that sometimes in some of the green birds in the neotropics, so like some of the honey creepers, they also have a similar kind of structure.
Oh.
But anyway, as I said, we can speak forever, right?
Yeah, we can. But that was
Yeah,
a fantastic day. I just will treasure that forever. I really
I'm sure.
enjoyed it. And thank you to my husband for deciding to go out for a walk on his own so that I could still stay in the garden and see what plants were coming.
Oh yeah. So another place that you've been birding is a truly a dream destination for most of us, right? For me, definitely. Um, and we'll begin here by, as we spoke about your husband just now, right? This amazing image of a pair of chinstrap penguins against that iconic landscape. Now, I can tell you as a tropical man, there isn't anything more alien to me than somewhere so absolutely, utterly cold. Uh,
It was,
so,
it was a, well, it was a trip of a lifetime. We were so
yeah.
fortunate to be able to go, but it was really alien there. And it was so, you kind of get used to it once you're there. But I'll tell you how I really recognized how almost sterile it felt there.
Hmm.
So you got used to the cold, and actually the daytimes weren't too cold. It was quite bizarre because we were there in the height of their summer.
Yeah.
There were lots of blue skies and the sun was out, and you could feel the warmth of the sun. So it wasn't freezing cold. When it was a grey day like that, yes, it was cold and it was a bit hard to take, because when the temperature dropped, it really dropped. But after we left there, we went to Iguazu Falls, which is on the borders of Argentina and
In
Brazil
Brazil, yeah.
and Uruguay, I think. And gosh, just the change from having this cold, clear air with hardly any sound, it was so. I really noticed, because I always listen for bird song.
Hmm.
I really noticed that there were no sort of ambient bird sounds. So, okay, we were on a ship a lot of the time, but when we stopped at the islands, when you got
Yeah.
to a rookery and there were penguins everywhere, yes, there was noise. But only in a couple of places did I ever hear sort of the chirps of other birds. But when we got to Iguazu, suddenly our senses were kind of like overloaded with the sound of insects, of birds, with colour, with heat. It was just like, and that suddenly made me recognize the real contrast we'd had from Antarctica to here. But anyway, back to Antarctica. Yeah, John, my husband John, is a landscape photographer mainly, but he started to branch out into bird photography just to sort of help me out, because I can't always take the photographs that I want to take, and also because, like, even in Antarctica, when we went on land, I tended to sort of stay away from the other people because I wanted to kind of experience stuff on my own. So they would all crowd off to go to look at rookeries and things, and I would kind of like hold back and find space and just watch and listen, which meant that because John had gone off searching for photographs, he came back with the really great photographs, and I didn't really get to see the same sights he did. But I definitely saw all these birds. I just saw them in different ways, and I certainly didn't take the photographs. Although I think, no, that the Magellanic penguins on the left, that was John as well. I should have put that in the thing. So anything you see that looks really good, that's his. And I'm pretty sure that king penguin is his, but I think we did have a debate over this because I had quite a few king penguin photographs that were close up, and they had gorgeous plumage. I should have shared one of the chicks with you because they look amazing in their fluffy overcoats. And some of them were going through a molt where they were starting to get their adult feathers, and one in particular, it was such a shame because it looked like he had kind of like a grass skirt on. He was, but it was only around part of it. It looked like he was covering his tush. You know, it just had like this little fluffy bit around his backside, and then he was like moving into his adult feathers. But yeah, the sounds of the rookeries were amazing. You know, where the penguins were just again, well, and the smell, because there's quite a lot of
of course. It's not like they can fly off to do the business anywhere else, right?
No. So there was that as well. But it was still an amazing experience.
How many species of penguins did you see in all?
We saw 6 in the various locations that we went to. So we saw Magellanic, Chinstrap, Gentoo, King, Adelie. And we did see one other, and I can't remember which one it was. But if you go to my early episodes, episode 9 and episode 10, we talk all about the penguins that we saw. Isn't that terrible? Okay. But, you know, I've just done episode 100. So, you know, it was a while ago that I did 9 and 10. I can't remember. It was about 7 years ago that we did this trip as well. So it was a while ago.
Interesting. So, like, many people go there for the penguins and for the, just like these iconic birds, these highly sought after birds, right? But I find when you, as you said, when you just stay put and you let your eyes drift, you don't follow all the crowds, you see many of the different birds, right? So, hey, you saw one of my favorites, which is the snowy sheathbill.
And that was a bird. So I do have a terrible tendency not to do tons of research before I go to a new place. So I knew nothing about snowy sheathbills. So when I first saw this bird, I thought it was some sort of pigeon because it looks kind of like pigeon-like. Yeah. But it just looked a bit odd to be a pigeon. Very, very big feet, and its face was kind of like slightly bare, a bit vulture-like, I felt. But it was only afterwards that I found out that their sort of primary role there is to be a carrion, and it eats all sorts of things that you wouldn't expect a bird to be able to get by on, like poop and dead things. But it's a scavenger, and when you know that and you look at it, you can see it's got the features that would allow that. It's got the claws in the feet that would allow it to pull things apart. It's got the bare face that would allow it to keep clean and sort of delve into things. But yeah, it's interesting. It's a snowy white bird, but I guess that's a camouflage thing because normally there'd be snow everywhere.
Yeah, true. And I was also reading that. I'm not sure if that's what's going on in this picture here, but they also eat regurgitated krill. That's like when penguins go to feed their chicks, they would interfere and they would kind of like bully their way in, and they would gobble up some of that regurgitated food.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised because they were definitely, interacting and not, they didn't seem welcomed by the penguins, put it that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, you saw
But
some other birds.
these other two birds, again, this was exactly because I'd wandered away from the crowd and
Hmm.
I had no idea what I was seeing. So, first of all, the little finch, I knew it was a finch, but I didn't know what
Yes.
type of finch. And I think it's called a bridled finch.
Yeah, white bridal finch.
White
You
bridal
have,
finch,
yeah,
yeah. So there was a pair of them, and they were just, very low to the ground, doing finch-like things, pecking at the
definite.
seed, and then
Yeah.
and sort of would stop just briefly and then fly on a bit further. So I couldn't get brilliant photographs. I just got what I could get, and because I didn't
Hmm.
have a guidebook actually with me on the day, I was really taking the photographs to try and get as many like details as I could, so I could identify it afterwards.
Yeah.
With the plover, that was, well, I just knew I was going to have to take a photograph because all I knew, it was some kind of wading bird.
Yeah.
It was brown. It had some markings. I really have I'm really challenged when it comes to wading birds.
Hmm.
It's great when there's only one or two actually because it's not so overwhelming. But
Yeah.
even then, I knew, I had no idea what it was. I just thought it looks a bit like, a ringed plover or something like that. So I'll take some photographs. Now that was the female. I think that was a female or an immature. And then there was a
Hmm.
male, which has more russet on it. And it was a
Yeah.
double, was it a two bridled or
Two-banded.
two banded
Oh,
plover?
yeah.
Yeah. So the male had more solid colouring and some chestnut on it, which was
Yes.
quite striking to see. But yeah, for me, whenever I see, usually it's some sort of sandpiper or something, and I don't know what type. And
I love that.
I try to, I love looking at them and I love
Yeah.
watching them running up to the waves and then running away again, or like with turnstones where they'll turn things over to look
Yeah,
for stuff.
definitely.
So they've got tons of great behaviors. It's just that I
Yeah.
just have this kind of little bit of a block with identifying them.
Yeah, I would say that this one might be a young bird. Just
Right.
so based on the feathers, so you can see very clearly defined edges to all of the feathers, which to me, now I have no experience with this bird, so I could be dead wrong. But generally in shorebirds, that tends to indicate that they are new feathers, and so it might be a young bird because the adults tend to have black markings on the bands, and they have a chestnut on the back of the head. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, which I definitely saw in the other
Yeah.
bird. Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. And I would have you know that this is the first that finch, that white bridal finch, it's the first time I've seen many people go to Antarctica and go to South Georgia, these places, and they come back with a lot of amazing photographs. And I've never seen anyone photograph any of these finches.
It's because no
So
one's looking there. They're looking at
yeah,
the
right.
bigger birds.
Exactly. So thank you. Thank you for your kind of modus operandi and how you do things. So now we get to see things that it's not usually what people share from these trips. Merrily wants to know if Emperor is a missing penguin.
Well, no, we didn't see an emperor because they're found much further south, and we only went to the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula.
Okay.
So, no, I will.
Even Rockhopper or something like that.
Oh, yes, I think it might have
Or
been. I
or
tell you what, I'm going to
macaroni.
be very naughty, and I'm going to quickly look at my website to see what the bird was that we saw. Just bear with me. You
Sure.
asked me. Oh no, I won't. I won't. Look, we'll find out afterwards. I think it was a rockhopper.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the ones that have got kind of, they're a little bit like macaroni penguins, but not quite. They've got the sort of quills.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was rockhopper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but I think there are two species. I think there's northern and southern rockhopper. But I
Okay.
can't remember how to tell them apart. So
Okay,
please don't ask.
I will have to check. So this what you're showing here. This was another
Yeah.
moment where I wandered off from the crowd, and I was so pleased that I did because we were on. I think this was on. It was one of the islands in the Falklands, and they have striated caracaras there, which are these large birds of prey. But they live in very close proximity to humans. And actually, I was listening to I think it was a podcast by the Rocky Point Birds Observatory. I think it was that one. But they've got a series on various birds, and they had an interview with someone who'd been working with striated caracaras down there, and it was it's only like they've only had people living near them for about the last 200 years, so they're still, they're still working out the boundaries between the birds and the humans, and they're known for doing things like taking pies off windowsills and things like this. But anyway, I walked away from the crowd, and then I just saw this bird land on the path in front of me and just start having a dust bath. I was like, I'm standing here, but it's like, yeah, whatever. I just want to have this dust bath. I was just really amazed at watching it. So I just was transfixed by watching this big bird just having a dust bath. And then blow me down, I just walked along a bit further, and this meadowlark was also having a dust bath. It was obviously one of those kind of days. But again, I this was only the second time I'd ever seen a meadowlark, and it was only the day before I saw my first one. And yes, to see them like with their guard down, just having a dust bath,
and
that feels quite special.
Of course, yeah. And this is a kind of like the meadowlark, which I think this is a long-tailed meadowlark. I'm not sure. That's a kind of size bird that you would usually see dust bathing. So meadowlarks or wrens or that small kind of bird. But to see a caracara bathing, that kind of large bird I'm sure was pretty interesting.
Oh, it was brilliant. And I just felt like, I looked around and there was no one else there. And I'm like, you're missing this.
Yeah, for those of you who are wondering, caracaras are actually, they may look like hawks, but they're more closely related to falcons. So you can look at that face, it looks very much like a falcon. And so here's another picture by John, your husband.
Yes.
And this is absolutely incredible. And I'm telling you that this albatrosses in general as a family have been a family of birds that's captivated me for many years. I've never seen one, and I would really, really love to see one at some point in time. But yeah,
I mean, these ones are the iconic black-browed albatross. And
did you see any others, any other species like wandering or royal?
Yes, yes, actually, now you mention it, but not close up. So we saw the other ones actually while we were at sea.
Yeah.
I think we only saw one wandering albatross, and we saw a royal albatross, and there was another species. Is there a brown albatross or
there's some darker ones like sooty mantled and stuff like that.
Right, yes. I'd have to go back to look at my bird list to know for sure, but there was definitely darker coloured albatross as well. But they were just wonderful to see. I mean, really iconic, and to see them on land was, I just saw them briefly because I was so busy looking elsewhere. John walked further and he saw the nests, which is how he got to see some of these behaviours, which he photographed. So that's where I missed out, where I could have enjoyed seeing that. But there was a big rookery with the black-browed albatross, I believe the rockhopper penguins, and imperial shags, I think they were.
Oh yeah.
But yeah,
they have lovely eyes, don't they?
Exactly. And so I was really, really drawn to them, and I totally kind of like didn't see. And there were some herring, or maybe herring gulls, but other kinds of gulls around, maybe black-backed gulls. But I kind of like, it could have been that they were something really special, and I was like, oh, let me look at these shags though, because they've got these amazing eyes. So I was getting a bit distracted by those.
It happens.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. And you go places, and so like if I was a really good birder, I would do all of my research before I went to a place. I would have a list knowing what was likely in that area and what I could see, and I would go and search for them. I'm not that kind of birder, and I probably do miss out on seeing birds because I don't have that methodical search pattern. I just want to see what I'm experiencing, what's around me, what I can see. And it's afterwards when other people say, oh, did you see such and such? Or there was such and such there. I was like, oh, that would have been nice to see. So there are times when I will have missed out.
Yeah.
But
But
you
then there
know.
are other times when you have these really profound experiences with
Exactly.
a lot of birds. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we have to reinvent that definition of what is a good birder. You know, it's not a
Yes.
linear scale at all.
No, no, you're right. And it really, what's a good bird is what's right for you.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So what we're going to do now is we're going to head a little bit further north, and what we will do is um, go up to North America for a very recognizable species. And you all should be seeing my screen right now. Whoa, hold on. You know what I
We,
did? I did not share the sound.
ah,
There we go.
there's not much sound actually, but it does add to the effect.
Yeah, that's the ambience of it. And I close the whole thing. So please bear with me. I am
Okay, well,
sorry.
I'll set the thing up. So, um, you'll see that it was a very hazy looking video, and the reason it is because it was foggy, and it was really quiet, and there was a lot of water in the air. Sort of, it wasn't quite raining. It was kind of like a very misty drizzle, and I was out on the deck of the cottage that we were in, and it was really quiet, and every now and then you'd hear a loon call out, and there'd be gulls, and I was just taking it all in, and all of a sudden there was kind of like a rustle above me, and I couldn't, I just looked up thinking, oh, a small bird's landed, but no, it was a bald eagle, and it had landed in the tree just above the next cabin with fish, and it started eating it. And so it's a very smoky video, but you'll hear the water and the navigation buoy in the channel that was beeping because of the fog. And I was just transfixed. This bird was just above me. I was on Zoom, but not a very great Zoom because it was only a small compact camera. And it just sat there eating the fish. And it was just like an amazing close. I was like, oh, I can't believe I'm seeing this so close. And just it in a second, I think it had decided that there was actually no more fish to be got from this carcass.
I think that was a realization point right there.
Yeah, and it just kind of steps away from it, which was so
Well,
funny because that fish carcass then landed on next door's patio. So I just have this image of them coming out in the morning thinking, what? Why is there a dead fish on the ground? But it was really interesting. It was just amazing to have this close encounter. And it was just really eerie because it had been so quiet. And I was so pleased I was videoing it. So I was like, no one's going to believe that I was this close to a bald eagle.
yeah, I've never seen one. Oh, there it goes.
I have actually. We did go to a bird of prey day at one of our local areas, and I have actually had a bald eagle sit on my arm.
Ooh,
And the photograph of me with this bald eagle, I could not have looked more uncomfortable because when you're that close to a bald eagle, you are very aware of the size of that bill. And
yeah.
also it's really heavy. And so
That,
I was kind of like, take the photograph, take the photograph. It's like through gritted teeth. I wanted to see this bird, but I wasn't sure I wanted to look at it right there.
yeah, of course,
But
of course.
that moment in the wild, seeing a wild bald eagle that
Yes,
close, that
yeah,
was, and it totally didn't care about me. It wasn't interested in me at all.
yeah,
Wanted to eat its fish and then just get on with its life. And that was a wonderful moment to see.
yeah. It has a presence, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I understand that you have another ball eagle story for us. Do you mind sharing that?
I will tell you it, and I'll try not to, it's one of those stories which makes me laugh so much. And I did actually record a small piece about it when it happened, and I was listening to it earlier on, and I was cracking up laughing again, which is a clear sign that anyone now listening to it will not find it funny at all. But we had just arrived on Vancouver Island. We were staying in this little cabin. It wasn't the same cabin, it was a different area. And I hadn't yet that holiday seen a bald eagle, and I was really looking forward to seeing one. And I was out on the deck, and I could see one flying towards us. So I quickly called my husband out onto the deck and said, there, can you see it? And he couldn't see it. And it was flying straight towards us, but I could tell the trajectory was it was going to fly over the top of us. And I thought, right, we're going to get a better view out the front of the cabin. So I turned round and raced to go through the cabin to the front door. not knowing that my husband had shut the screen door, and I just bounced off this screen door, and I was really stunned because I was like, I do not know what happened. It was a dark screen door and it was dark indoors, and I was just thinking I would rush through. It turned out my husband had shut the screen door because I had told him, always shut the screen door because it keeps things out. And it did. It kept me out of going through the thing. Anyway, I saw the bald eagle. He didn't. He didn't believe I'd even seen one. And I couldn't prove it because I couldn't get there fast enough to see it. But I big hand for your screen doors. We don't have screen doors over here because we don't have insects as much. I'd love them. I think they're a brilliant invention. Not so great for running into, though.
Oh boy, yeah, that's a wonderful story. Very visual.
I can remember it now.
Yeah,
I
I'm
was so
imagining
lucky
it.
that it was because I had my ball cap on. So the brim hit the door first, which
Ooh,
bounced me off, which I was
yeah,
really pleased at, because if it had
of
been just the
course.
glass door or it had been my head, that
Yeah,
wouldn't have been so great. So,
yeah, definitely. And at least you didn't go through the door.
yes,
That would have
yes,
also been pretty disastrous,
it
right?
would. Yes.
Yeah. So there is one more thing that before we wrap up this episode, because we've already gone beyond an hour.
Yes. Well, we
As
know what we're like, don't
Yeah,
we?
of course. Yeah, it's not like that was a surprise. Um, so you host the Casual Buddha podcast. Do you
Yes.
mind telling us how was this conceptualized and eventually brought to the point where it is today?
Yes, well, very briefly, obviously, I will tell you. But as you've obviously heard this evening, I love talking about birds. I love to share what I've seen about birds, and I actually want to share other people's stories as well. So I'm really fascinated to talk to people about birds. I've been a real big podcasting fan, listening to podcasts for well over a decade. I just think they're a wonderful way to learn about things, to be entertained, and to just find out other people's perspective on a whole range of things. I mostly listen to comedy and interview shows, but I just had this idea of, I was thinking about doing some talks actually and sharing some of the stories that I'd had by talks. And then I thought, why would I travel around to various places to talk to maybe a couple of people that might want to hear, where I could just put it out to the world, and somewhere in the world there'll be someone that wants to hear my stories. It may not be people around me here, but somewhere out there will be. And so I just started the podcast, and it has been the best thing I ever did. It's put me in touch with so many amazing people, yourself included. And yeah, I've made so many friendships, both in the podcasting space and in the bird space. And I've still got so many stories to share, not only stories of my own, but from bringing people onto the show to share their stories. I just love it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot more work than I ever thought a podcast would be, but it is so worth it. And yeah, I've just released my 100th episode, which I'm really, really proud about. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Episode 100.
Yep, that's out. It came out yesterday, so it's very, very fresh.
Ooh, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for that. So I have one final question for you. Do you have a bucket list bird?
Hmm.
Mm.
There are birds that I would like to see. I don't have like this one that I would love to see. There are birds I'd like to see again because I didn't see them for very long, or just in passing. But I'm quite keen to see a quetzal. I think they look like
Yeah,
quite an interesting bird.
they are
Um,
definitely.
there are lots of hummingbirds I would like to see. I would love to see some more fruit-eating birds, and I've been very drawn to seeing these webcams where people have like bird tables up with
Yeah.
bananas out and birds coming to eat bananas, and like, who'd have
Hmm.
thought birds would eat bananas? Um, yeah, so do you know what? I don't have one bird. I would just love to travel still one
Yeah.
day again.
Yeah.
But
Hopefully.
even we just did a quick holiday to Suffolk, which is just a couple of counties over from where we are,
Hmm.
2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. And I saw something like 5 lifers. So,
Yeah.
I've got so many birds that I can still see just in this country.
Yes. Of
Um,
course.
but yeah, I absolutely want to come to other countries again and see birds there. I don't
Yeah.
have one bird. I just want to keep seeing birds.
Yeah. I understand completely. But it's like I would say that I would agree with you on that with quetzals because they have this kind of this magical kind of aura to them. So I'm seeing in the chat that some of our viewers are living in the US, and they see bald eagles quite often. So Miranda says that she lives on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington, and can attest that we are very spoiled here and see bald eagles often daily at times. So thank you for that, Miranda. I've never seen a bald eagle.
What I've
So
been
I'm,
stunned
yeah,
about is knowing that bald eagles are quite scavenger type birds, and in some of like the fishing ports,
yeah,
there will be hundreds of them hanging around. And
that's what they're saying in
yeah,
the chat. Yeah,
yeah,
they've,
we
especially in
went
Alaska.
to we went to somewhere in Cape Breton um, uh, many years ago when we were traveling through Nova Scotia, and we spent some time up in Cape Breton, and we went to one port, and I mean, there it was probably only about 10 or 15 bald eagles, but they were all bald eagles just hanging around
Yeah,
like gulls, you know.
yeah, like gulls, exactly.
Yeah, and it's just, mind blowing to see that.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Anyway, so I think that we can wrap up at this point in time. So huge appreciation to you, Suzy, for joining us, and for everyone watching live, and to everyone everywhere who appreciates birds. So I hope to see you all in a month for next episode. And remember to join us at learnthebirds.com so you get that newsletter so you wouldn't miss a beat, and you'd know when the timing is for the next episode, because I'm not sure. I haven't got a confirmation from the next guest, but it's likely to be a birder from Belize in Central America. So that definitely should be interesting, right? We have a lot of incredible events coming up here. And what I'll do before I sign off is just to let you know that our next 4 webinars for June, we have on the 3rd of June, we have Mauritius Paradise Flycatcher with Veronique Coute. I hope I said her name properly. And the following week is Derek Keats with Introducing Wild Bird Photography. And on the 17th of June, we have Benny Isaac Jacob Schwartz. Some of you may know him as Beegis, Birds by Beegis. He is going to be talking about the hummingbird, right? We spoke a lot about hummingbirds in this chat, and Benny will be talking about the marvelous hummingbird. His presentation is entitled Sea to Summit, and that's a hummingbird from North America through Central America into South America. On the 24th of June, our last webinar for June, is a Birdability. So Birdability is an organization in the US. I highly recommend that you check it out. And their webinar is entitled Because Birding is for Everybody and Everybody. So they're really trying to make a positive difference in terms of making the outdoors a lot more inclusive for everyone. So I really hope that you all can join us on some of these webinars at least, right? So yeah, so thanks everyone. And yeah, remember, take care, stay safe, and remember that bird is the word. So take care. I'm just gonna end the stream right now. Where did we go? Good. So I believe I ended the stream.